Good morning, everyone. It's Victoria Beale with the Ohio LTAP Center, and I'd like to welcome you to this morning's webinar, Work Plans and Performance Evaluations, Your Tools for Getting Things Done. We appreciate your time and joining us on the webinar this morning. I have a few housekeeping items, and then we're going to get right into the content of this morning's presentation. We are attempting to record the webinar. So if we are successful with that, I'll make certain to send a link out to everyone once the recording's been posted on our YouTube channel. With that said, though, I don't want it to dampen anyone's enthusiasm for asking questions. So if you have questions, what I'd like to have you do is to put those in the chat pod while I'm doing the actual presentation portion of the webinar. I'm happy to open the phone lines up at the end for audio questions. If you are looking at your screen and you don't see a chat pod on the bottom left-hand side of it, please look for a circle with a thought bubble in it and click on that. And that should make your chat pod appear, and you can feel free to enter whatever questions you have while I'm presenting in that chat pod, and I will work on getting those answered as quickly as I can. So with that, I believe those are all of our housekeeping items. One other thing, I know a number of you have called into the webinar, and hopefully you have an accompanying screen that you're watching the webinar on. If you don't, you're not going to get as much out of it as those who are watching it and listening to it. But if you don't have a screen to watch on, you're still welcome to listen to the webinar as well. So hopefully you have both, though, and you can follow along on your screen in addition to listening to the audio. Before we started the webinar, I did email out an assessment, and hopefully you received that and were able to complete it if you were interested in finding out your style before we talk about things today. If you are one of the folks who just registered in the last half an hour to an hour for the webinar, you probably weren't included on that email, and I'll resend the assessment after the webinar is complete, along with hopefully a link to the recording and a PDF of the presentation itself. So with that, we're going to go ahead and move forward. And again, please feel free to put questions in the bottom left-hand side of the chat pod, and I'll work on getting those answered as quickly as I can. The training this morning is really intended to assist you with achieving your agency's goals, and I'm hopeful that once we've, talked through the webinar and how this process works, that you'll see value that you can apply in your everyday work. Why do we even want to use a work plan? That's a question I get a lot, especially from newer managers. And really the reason we look at using a work plan is that you have assigned responsibilities that are key to carrying out your job and those who are reporting to you. And that work plans are definitely a tool for managing your agency's or office's responsibilities, including those that you're assigning to your staff members. Work plans are exactly what the name says. It's a plan on how you're going to accomplish the tasks that are being required of you by your agency in your position. And I do have a question in the chat pod, Pamela. Yes, I will be sending out the slideshow, the PowerPoint, via email to those who are on here. So you'll definitely get that after the presentation. So this morning, I have some learning objectives for you. I want to make certain that when we're finished with the training that you have a better understanding of why it's important that work plans are established. Also, how you can go about writing work plan goals that you can actually measure. And this is where we're looking at objective versus subjective, because I've seen people through the years go through the effort of writing, a work plan or evaluation goals, and they didn't frame them in the right way, so they really weren't measurable. So we're going to talk about that. We're also going to discuss why it's important to have participatory management, and also how to actually apply the work plan process in your daily activities. So moving into the first section of what we're going to learn, we want to talk about what are really the nuts and bolts of establishing a work plan. You do need a work plan. A lot of people ask, why do you even need one? Some are curious why people who are working for them don't already know what they're supposed to be doing. And in a lot of cases, it's true. People do know, the tasks that they've been doing for years, but, there's also new activities that come along, and really, getting your work done on a daily basis is kind of like taking a trip. And you wouldn't plan a trip without mapping out the route. And similarly, when you're assigned tasks at work, you need a method that helps you to get them accomplished. And a work plan can provide you that method. It's a structured way in which you can list out assigned responsibilities or tasks and track them to make sure that they're actually completed. It even provides a way for you to delegate and assign tasks for your staff members and then track their status in completing tasks. Because I can tell you that there's no better feeling than getting to the end of a work plan year and knowing that you have either completed everything that's on the work plan or can have exact details as to why something might not have been accomplished, but the new plan for getting that accomplished. So your work plan benefits. It not only gives you a roadmap for your staff, but it can be written to provide you the overall plan for your fiscal year. And it helps to provide a balance between routine items and project or short-term assignments. And that's an area where we can see people struggle with because they know what they need to get done on a daily basis, but then this project comes along, and how do you work that into the flow? And best of all, it provides you that foundation for the performance evaluations for your staff. And I know that a lot of folks dread performance evaluations. From an HR perspective, they're really important because they help you in measuring, and keeping things on task and on track for the business and your agency. So there's really some basic documents you need before you even sit down to start establishing your work plan. In order to begin establishing a work plan for your agency, your office, or your work unit, you need to have position descriptions for your staff in hand. Any policies that need to be followed in the work or standard operating procedures, your agency's business plan. And I find that's very important because when I establish a work plan, I make sure that what we are doing links upward into the agency's business plan so I can show the nexus or connection to the work we're completing. And also it helps when you're setting up the work plan for those that work for you because you can then show the connection for them to the higher level completing of the overall agency's business plan. Projects from your supervisor, and even proposed projects from your staff or your own notes. I have ideas that come to us all throughout a year's time, and if it's not something we're going to incorporate immediately, what I do is I make some notes about it, I put it in the file for the end of the year, and then we revisit that to see, is it something that we can work into the future year's work plan, or is it something, how can we get a fit for that item if it's something that we feel is important and can help us in completing our work for the agency. But you're going to use these reference documents to start outlining the tasks that need to be completed in not only the overall office work plan, but then broken out into individual staff work plans. But once you have all those together, you need to make sure to keep in mind some basic rules about how you're going to write things. So, the next thing we're going to talk about is really a writing style for your work plan and how your leadership style is going to impact the work plan that you're writing. So, we're going to discuss first the writing style of your work plan. And this is where we want to have the conversation about looking at framing something as objective versus subjective. Performance evaluations, as I mentioned before, have often been dreaded by managers because of how difficult they find it to actually measure an employee's performance. And if they're having a hard time measuring the employee's performance, a lot of times it's because that they didn't write the performance evaluation goal in an objective manner. And with objective, what do we mean? Objective means that a goal can be measured or evaluated on independent criteria. Subjectively written goals are written so the answer is based on the opinion of the person that's answering the question about how their performance occurred or the level of performance, not independent criteria. So, when you're looking at writing a task for a work plan, a manager's got to be really careful to write it so that it can be easily measured through objective criteria at that performance evaluation time. If the manager's not there for some reason at performance evaluation time, anybody who has the additional knowledge of the work the person's done should be able to look at that and answer the question about whether or not the person completed what was assigned. So let's look at some examples. One example would be if a manager were to put down, say in our area with the training that we do, to do a good job providing training classes. If that was a work plan goal, I would look at it and ask the question, can I answer this objectively, or does it require a subjective answer? And really with do a good job providing training classes, it's subjective because you're not giving a standard by which you're measuring whether or not someone did a good job. If we were going to rewrite it to make it objective, we would take a look at setting a standard that could then be measured. We might reframe that one to say achieve a minimum average evaluation score of 4.0 on all post-course surveys. And that would give you an objective standard to go back and look for the individual who had been teaching. Did the people in the classroom, did they evaluate the person at a 4.0 on this scale or above with the instruction that they provided? So really anybody could answer the question, did they meet the 4.0 or not, as opposed to whose definition of a good job. Another example would be, say you manage a lot of staff in the field. So you have someone that's managing field staff that's working for you. If you were to put down keep in contact with field staff, that would be a really hard performance evaluation goal to measure because you haven't defined what do you mean by keep in contact with. It's really you've given a subjective goal that it would be your opinion whether or not they had kept in contact with field staff. But if you were going to rewrite it, you could look at framing it so you said, visit each field office a minimum of twice monthly. Well, that gives you an objective standard to look at and how you're going to measure the performance. Did they meet with the field staff a minimum of twice monthly? If they didn't meet the goal. If they did, that's great. They've met the goal. So you want to make certain, again, that you're looking at writing your goals objectively. You have all the documents for what needs to be accomplished in the office, all of the base documents we talked about first, and now you're putting yourself in the right mind frame in order to write your goals in an objective manner. Here's another one. The weather's going to be nice today. Is that an objective or a subjective statement? It's really subjective because whose definition of nice? It might be that one person would think that, 25 degrees and 2 foot of snow is nice, while another person wants 80 and sunny. So really you need to rewrite it to make it objective. It's not going to rain today and the temperature is going to be in the low 70s. Wouldn't that be, in my opinion, that would be a great day. But we've turned that subjective statement into an objective statement. So the next section we're going to talk about is leadership styles. And this is where the assessment that I emailed out to everyone is going to come into play, because we're going to talk about your leadership style, because it really does play a lot into not only how you write the work plan, but how you administer it. And there are 4 basic leadership styles that we're going to discuss. And if you didn't complete the assessment before the webinar, it'd be interesting if you want to look at this portion of it to go back and complete it afterwards. But again, it definitely is going to impact your style as to how you write the work plan. So there's 4 different styles. We have sequential, logical, global, and personable. and we're going to briefly review each one. The sequential decision makers. With sequential decision makers, they really require lots of specific information, and they want details of what's being asked, and they want to know the best way to do something. They want evidence that a particular method is best and the exact steps for completing a task correctly. So those are our sequential decision makers. There's logical decision makers, and I'm not saying one style is better over another style. There's, diversity is what really helps to enrich, a work team, but, understanding where people are coming from and really where you are coming from as well helps you to be a better manager in managing a situation. So with logical decision makers, they want specifics, but they really want reasons for making the decision more than those specifics. And they need to be able to defend their position. They want clear understanding of the possible results. Logical decision makers don't involve their feelings when they're making choices. They try to make the best choice from the available options. And this is, definitely different than your global decision makers. Global decision makers want to explore all of the possibilities, and they need to know that their decisions fit into the big picture. Their global decision makers are big picture thinkers, and they feel the need to be more creative. They don't let data restrain them, but instead they look at possibilities for their decision. And that's different yet from your personable decision making. Personable decision makers need lots of information, including a good definition of the problem. But most of all, they need other people involved in the decision-making process. They want cooperation from others in choosing a solution, and they are very in tune with other people's needs. They want a group ownership of the decision. So you have these 4 different styles of decision-making. How do you translate that over into leadership styles? Well, the sequential decision makers tend to be more autocratic leaders. And your logical and your global, they tend to be more democratic leadership styles, while your personable tends to be more of a free rein leader. And again, there's no specific leadership style that is always right in every situation. It's best to understand all 3 and to be able to move between them as needed in different situations. Because, with your autocratic leadership style, it flows from the sequential decision making, and these autocratic leaders are very task-oriented, and normally the manager carries out all of the decision-making process with very little input from the staff. Your autocratic leaders communicate to their staff in a one-way method. Two-way communication is a rarity with a autocratic leadership style. And there's important times when you do need to use an autocratic leadership style. With autocratic leadership styles, these are primarily situations where command and control are very necessary, and there's very little margin for error, such as if you were a fire chief at the scene of a fire who needed to command the firefighters, battling the blaze, or a military commander who's in a combat situation. So, the autocratic leadership style is available and can be used, but it really needs to be applied in the correct situations. Whereas your free rein leadership style, this one flows from the personable decision making. And with the free rein leadership, it's the most unstructured leadership style, where your employees have complete freedom really to make final decisions and complete their work through methods that they choose. There has to be a really high level of trust with your free rein leadership style. So, when should you look at using a free rein leadership style? Some people actually think you should never use a free rein leadership style, but there's good times when it can be employed, and really helps to get the work accomplished. And this is where, if you're fortunate enough to have employees who are self-starters, or who have years of experience doing their job, the free rein leadership style can work really well. It could also be a type of work they're doing which requires more freedom, such as research and development departments or software manufacturers. So you want to take a look at, the work that's being accomplished, and you might say, well, we aren't software manufacturers in the work we do, or we don't do R&D, but maybe there's different types of tasks that you have on a work plan that need more of that free rein leadership style than another style. And that's very important to understand, when to apply that. And then you've got your democratic leadership style. With this style, it flows from that logical and global decision making, and it's a mix of the autocratic with the free rein. It encourages participation in decision-making with lots of two-way communication between staff and yourself. Yet it still permits the manager to make that final decision. Staff input here is key to create an environment of teamwork. So this leadership style, I know from the work plan that we do here at the LTAP Center, is probably the one that is utilized the most, but there are times when we have items that the free rein can be applied to, and probably a lot rarer the autocratic. But your democratic leadership style, you can use that when you want to engage the team in the decision-making process and permit them to have some control over how the decision's been arrived at regarding how the work is to be completed. Examples of where that democratic leadership style should be used is team-based work or maybe even decentralized business units. So it's important to know when to use which style and to know that they're out there. And as a good manager, you should be able to move through the different styles and understand when to apply them in each situation. So the next item we're going to discuss is actually writing the work plan. So we've talked about what do you need, your base documents. We've talked about decision-making styles, leadership styles. We've talked about objective versus subjective statements, and how you actually write the work plan item out. So what we're going to discuss here is what is really a foundation for project management, and it's called a work breakdown structure. With the work breakdown structure, it guides you through the high-level responsibilities which need to be completed first, and then it allows you to break them down into tasks that you can assign to staff members on their individual work plans. When you're developing a work breakdown structure, it's best to review the entire work plan for your office or agency first and complete the high-level responsibilities. And then from there you can work on breaking it down into the lower level tasks. But make sure you're setting realistic tasks and keep your statements objective so those tasks that you've set can actually be measured. We're going to have a little bit of fun here and how we talk about a work breakdown structure, because I tried to think of an example where hopefully everybody can relate to the process. So I picked a general task that hopefully most of you viewing this webinar have been able to participate in, and that's planning to go on a vacation. So I'm just going to talk you through how we would apply a work breakdown structure for a vacation. So we need first to figure out what are the major tasks in getting ready to go for a vacation. And really the three major tasks that you would need to accomplish right before you go would be readying your house or your apartment, packing for the trip, and then your work preparation. So think of this as how we're applying a process, but you can still take this process and apply it in your actual work at your agency. So for a work breakdown structure, and you might do a work breakdown structure as you're working through this in a conference room with sticky notes on the wall, or even just diagramming it out at your desk, but you want to start by putting your major tasks at the top level of the work breakdown structure. So once you've figured out what those major tasks are, then the next step is going to be to put subtasks under each one of the major tasks. So for the home task of getting your home ready, There's tasks that you can come up with under there, such as stopping your mail or stopping a paper if you get one. If you have pets, making sure you set up to get them boarded. Setting light timers. That was something my mom always did before we went on vacation. Maybe talking to your neighbors to tell them you're going to be away so they can keep an eye out and make sure no one's in your house when they shouldn't be. Adjusting your thermostat so you're not going to waste your heating or cooling while you're away, and making sure that you have a check that all your doors and windows are secured. So those would be tasks that you would list under that higher level house task. And then with packing, you're going to look at not only packing for yourself, but if you have a significant other or spouse and any kids, making sure you've packed your tickets or reservation information, and definitely making sure you've packed your money for the vacation. And then that third task would be getting ready at work. So, you're just listing all these tasks out. You haven't added a priority to them yet. But, having a status meeting update right before you leave to debrief staff on pending items, changing your voicemail message to say you're out of the office, or setting up your out of office reply on your email, wrapping up pending items that you can take care of before vacation, and maybe even leaving some contact information with key staff in the case of an emergency event. So, now that we've not only have our high-level tasks, and we have the subtasks under them, we can actually talk about who's going to get assigned tasks and what our time frame is for assigning these tasks. So in this example, it's a very brief example. We only have 2 people we're going to assign things to, and we've got a 3-day period when you are going to be assigning things in. So, it's going to be either yourself or your significant other who's going to take care of the tasks. And so those are going to be the names you're going to put on this work breakdown structure. And then the time period we're going to look at is time from October 1st, which would be your last actual day at work before you leave for vacation. And then you actually leave on October 3rd. So you've got the 2nd, and there is an extra day to get ready to go. So you go back to that work breakdown structure now, and you put names and dates on it. And in this case, in the example that I'm showing you here on the screen, the dates are the circles, and 1, 2, or 3 means October 1st, 2nd, or 3rd. So with your house, you can divvy up things between yourself and your spouse or significant other there, as far as who's going to take care of what task, and then you can put dates on it. Things like stopping the mail or the paper can be done earlier than boarding the pets, or things about that you need to do on the actual day you're leaving, such as securing windows and doors. And then with your packing, that could all be done really by one person, but you split it up and give some responsibilities to others. And then, making sure that you put the date on it. And then for work, since your last day at work before vacation would be the 1st, it all has to happen on the 1st, and it is just all you since you're the only one there. But really with this process, hopefully you can see how we took the higher level tasks, broke them down into subtasks, and then, worked at putting ownership to the task and a deadline. So once you have that in place, you can actually then translate it over into a list for each person. And this is where you then are creating the work plan for the individuals. So, maybe my list would be the items that, I got assigned to me, and then, the significant other or spouse's list is the items that got assigned to them. So if you've done this in a work environment and you have a staff of 3, you take all of the items that were assigned to each individual and then add them to that individual's list, and it becomes their work plan, which then you can use as the foundation for the performance evaluation, because that's the task they need to accomplish, and you would measure them on. So what happens if a task doesn't get completed on time? Well, you don't have to worry, because you still know what needs to get accomplished, and you can just go in and adjust assignments or due dates to get that task work backed in and make sure that it hopefully does still happen on time. So how do you make a work plan? And we've kind of talked about this a little bit already, but you take your agency initiatives, the things that we discussed your office goals, your section goals, and then your individual tasks with the due dates. And you work those through to make sure that you have everything lined up. So, really the upper level step is brainstorming those items based on the documents and then creating that to-do list. And this is 6 steps that you can work through with this process. Creating that to-do list, for your office, the work breakdown structure. And then once you have the work breakdown structure, working it into personal work plans for each staff members. And I do want to, point out here that this second step and third step, these are really good places to get that democratic leadership style applied, because when people feel that they have direct control over what it is that they're doing, they're much more likely to take ownership of it and want to accomplish that without having to be pushed to accomplish it. And then, moving into the next steps, you take that work plan once you have it established, and you can review it with staff members for, the coming year during your performance evaluation time. And when we do performance evaluations in my office, there's always a work plan for the coming year at the same time that we're going over the work plan from the previous year and evaluating what the performance was on that. And that way they know what it is that needs to be accomplished. And then you can look at doing quarterly reviews of the work plans with the staff members. And really, when you get to the performance evaluation time at the end of the year, there shouldn't be any surprises about, where you feel, or not feel, but measure that their work is at and where they measure that their work is at, because you've been having these ongoing discussions on a periodic basis. And if you don't want to do quarterly reviews, at least sit down once in between, midpoint through the year, and have a conversation around, where are they with their work plan? Is there any assistance that they need? You don't want to have just complete free reign and not talk to them about it again until the next annual performance evaluation. It's important to engage and make sure that the staff members, are involved with that democratic leadership style. And then from there, you utilize that work plan that's been developed to actually write out the performance evaluation. So with that, I know I've moved through this pretty quickly, but I wanted to open it up for any questions that anyone might have. Happy to take questions either in the chat pod, or I can go ahead and open the phone lines up. This is more of a soft skill topic that we have done this morning, as opposed to the more technical topics that we tend to host on our webinars. So I don't see any questions coming in through the chat pod, so I'm going to go ahead and unmute everybody. I'll just run down the list. If you got a party going on in the background, you might want to just ask them to tone it down. But I'm happy to take questions, because I really feel that this process that I've explained to you this morning with work plans can be your key to making sure that things go well for you and for your staff as you're working through things. So it takes me just a second to unmute everybody. But if anybody has questions, you can feel free to go ahead and try asking them, see if I've gotten to unmuting you yet. I wish there was a way I could just unmute everybody at once.
Is there a way to listen to a recording of this?
I've tried to record it, and I won't know if it worked until we get to the very end. But if it did, we're going to post it on our YouTube channel, and we will definitely send it out to you.
Okay, great. I got in late.
No problem. That happens. So, but yeah, I mean, I couldn't imagine trying to manage a program in an office without using this process, and it's worked very, very well through the years. And I wish, back at the beginning of my career, somebody had explained it to me, because once I learned it and have been applying it, it just makes things so much better for everybody. Everybody knows what it is that's expected of them, and how they're going to be measured, and it just builds such a more cohesive team. So I've got everybody unmuted. Does anyone else have any other questions? Oh, let's see. Do you have recommendations on how to develop work plans when you manage people and you do not have strong knowledge of their technical area? That's a great question. I was actually put in that position back when I first came here to ODOT, and what I did is I had to do some legwork, but I dug in and I did everything I could to learn about their technical area the best I could. I had been assigned the equipment training section, and I had never operated a piece of equipment before in my life, let alone knew the difference between a track hoe and a backhoe and a loader. And I did the best I could to get as many resources and to learn the equipment. And I even went so far as to get my CDL temps and went out and learned how to drive some of the equipment just so I could really understand the best possible what it is that the folks were not only needed to know, but then needed to pass on in the training. And it was a process. It really was. But, I wouldn't deter anybody from, digging in and learning what they need to learn for a new section that's been assigned to them or a technical area. So, and don't be afraid to, find a subject matter expert or a mentor in that area even. I know we had a highway maintenance administrator in one of the districts who had been with ODOT over 40 years, and I was able to make a connection with that individual and call upon them with questions I had that I didn't necessarily want to take to the staff, because I felt like it was going to show that I didn't know, which I didn't. But they were able to definitely help me and guide me and give me good resources too. So, are there any other questions? Would you mind backing up a few slides to the one that outlined the process starting with the agency initiative? No, I wouldn't mind at all. Back here, how do you make a work plan? That's where these are the items that you in the beginning would collect up together. And it's really those documents that we talked about at the very beginning of the presentation, the employee's position description, your agency's business plan, those types of things that you want to make sure you have. And then, from there, any office goals that have been given, and section goals. And then, once you've worked through the work breakdown structure process, which is really the 6 steps on the next 2 slides, that's when, you end up with those individual tasks with the due dates. And yes, I'm definitely going to send you a copy of the slides and the presentation out to everybody. So, but, that these 6 steps really fit in between the 3rd and 4th step on that previous slide. And these 6 steps are the ones that you use to, get all of the work breakdown structure set up, brainstorming the major items for the office, and then creating the to-do list. Really, those are the subtasks under each of the items on your work breakdown structure. And then working them into the personal work plans for each staff member. Taking those tasks under each major area and assigning them and putting due dates on them. And then using that to build the individual work plan to-do lists with the deadlines that you use as the basis for your performance evaluation. Okay, any other questions? And I'm more than happy to take phone calls and talk about this. My background actually is labor and employment law, and I have an undergrad in HR, human resource management. So I am always happy to, talk through any type of, performance evaluation or work plan situation you have, or be a mentor if you'd like to, go through that process. So. Well, if we don't have any other questions, I'm going to let everybody get at least 20 minutes of their life back. We're going to go ahead and wrap things up then. So thank you all for being on the... Yes, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I have a quick question because
Sure.
I could not get on, and I just joined by audio just
That's
literally
fine.
probably 5 minutes ago, so I missed most of it. Is this Victoria
It
speaking?
is. It is.
Okay, great. Just making sure that it wasn't just you that sent out the invite and somebody else speaking. Okay, sorry.
Oh,
Thank you.
you're fine. It's Victoria Beale. And everybody who was registered is going to get an email from me that'll hopefully have, in addition to the PowerPoint and the assessment, a link to a recording. So if that is successful,
Great.
I'll send it out to everybody as well. All right. Well, everybody have a good rest of their morning, and hopefully you've gotten some good information this morning that can help make things better as you're working through your tasks. Thank you. Have a good day.
Great. Thank you.